Hello folks, R1 here. We are going to take a look at the Tiamat release. It is not an overly large release. I guess that's pretty understandable, coming just on the heels of the holidays. And CCP hasn't had a great deal of time to put a lot of content in this release. But one thing that has captured the community's imagination is the second tactical destroyer to be released, this one for the Minmatar, picturesquely named the Svipul. Now we can take a look at it right here. I like the fact that we've got this capability now where we can actually put it through its paces while it's still in our hangar directly from the fitting screen. And of course it mimics it in our hangar as well. That's kind of cool. I'm kind of wondering if that's going to become a thing now. A direct competitor to our championship ship spinning team. Try saying that 3 times real fast. I guess if we get a little counter that keeps track of it and flashes when you hit certain numbers of transformations in a given period of time, it will have officially arrived as an EVE Online esport. Now, Svipul has been commented upon as being an unusual name. It actually means Valkyrie. And in Old Norse, it also has a somewhat of a double meaning. It also means changeable, and I guess that's highly fitting. Let's take it out into space. That's what you really want to see. How does it look when you get it out in the ether? Yes, the Svipul is a good-looking ship. There's something very interesting about its weapon placement too that I'll point out in just a second, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at the hull. It is definitely a Minmatar design, although a bit more polished than many of them. In some ways it still somewhat looks like an explosion in a girder factory, but one done with a certain amount of style. It turns gracefully, and in this configuration, which is its propulsion configuration, it's pretty fast, as you can see. Now that speed will drop significantly as we transform into other modes, namely sniper mode and a defensive mode. The transformation modes that it can morph into are the same as its predecessor, the Amarian Confessor, and I think that's going to be fairly standard amongst all the tactical destroyers. There may be some variations, though. I held off on making this video for a little while for 2 reasons. One, the Svipul had some glitches in its animation, and I kind of wanted that to settle down before we took a look at them. And secondly, the soundtrack for the Tiamat expansion isn't out yet, and I didn't wait for that, and I almost wish I had. Now there we go into the sniper mode. Notice how the sensor array pops out and the flanges pop out to the side, presumably offering a greater targeting capability and tracking capability. And these geocitic domes at the very front extend out into a uncovered position, all for target acquisition and tracking. It's actually very clever how they've done that. And yes, he kind of looks like a little man, a little transformer man, when he's in this particular mode, but I like that. Now, he's still kind of all hanging out in this mode. He's like the little iron giant, but that's okay. I like that. Now let's go ahead and shift modes again. And I don't know if you can hear it that clearly in the recording, but they do have transformation sounds as well. Now we've gone into defensive mode. Everything tucks in. The little geocitic domes have pulled into the front, and even the little solar wings or blades at the top have pulled back into a protective covering, which is very practical and very cool. And I think the sounds that they have chosen when it transforms modes are perfect for the animation. Now I have noticed that those sounds are sometimes a little out of sync with the transformation itself, and I'm sure that that will eventually be corrected. There we go, back into speed mode again. Good looking ship. As far as armament goes, the Svipul can mount 6 artillery pieces or autocannons and 1 missile launcher of whatever type you desire. And I think we'll take it out to a belt because there is something, well, a couple of things really that I want to show you. One is the unusual weapons placement on this ship, and the other is a new feature in Eve. And you may notice it in the background, especially once we get out there, that the sounds are getting steadily better in Eve. The Does Eve have sound Mimi may eventually be going away. And they have added some extra weapons effects, kind of an echo effect to turreted weapons fire that is rather nice. It would overjoy me to have that old Eve Mimi go the way of the dodo, and for us basement dwellers to eventually have to take some of our hard-earned nickels and go out and buy a really good set of headphones, because we prefer to play Eve with the sound cranked up and are keeping our loved ones awake upstairs at night due to the overwhelming cacophony of noise coming from downstairs. That would make me a happy man. And I think someday very soon, perhaps Eve will have finally realized in its audio soundscape the same potential that the rest of the game exhibits. Now, as we hop out to this belt, there is one other animation that I want to show you as we go into warp. It's fairly understated compared to the rest of the animations, but keep your eye on the central raised section of the ship, right in the center. Did you see it? That area right there, the blocks that click up into position. Again, we have an animation where the ship becomes more exposed in a way as it enters warp. But those kind of look like some sort of cooling rails, perhaps to cool down the warp drive. I don't know what the technobabble reasoning behind it is. And there they go. They tuck back in when we arrive. And panels slide over. It's nice and protected now. So, interesting. Well, new tendency in the animations that we see. And the Confessor didn't have a warp animation, at least not one that I saw. I may have missed it. But this one, it's fairly hard to miss. Although not overstated in any way. Well, let's go ahead and target an asteroid and take a few shots at it. There won't be a whole lot of difference as we close, but as we get closer and closer to the asteroid, you'll notice more and more that echo effect as we get closer. And it's, again, not a huge thing, but it adds a certain, well, I hesitate to say reality to the soundscape, but considering our sensor drones out there, our camera drones that are supposed to be relaying audio information to us in a way that allows our brain to absorb that information in a more realistic manner, I guess it makes sense that there would be some sort of reverberation or echo effect. Now, I've got missiles going right now. I'm going to switch out here in a second and turn the missiles off. I'm going to leave it on at first, though, just because the combination of missile and gunfire as we close on this target actually sounds pretty good. Now, as we maneuver around, the thing about the weapons placement that I wanted to draw to your attention, you notice the weapons on the bottom, up at the front. Okay, there's your main bank there, then there's your main bank out here on the nose on these little blocks. But if you look carefully, there are also a set of weapons and placements, an identical set, at the rear of the ship. And they can all fire, you'll notice at different times. Perhaps 3 of the front ones will fire and 3 of the rear ones, or 3 on the bottom, and 3 on whichever side on top is closest. It all depends on the orientation and configuration of the ship. But for a whole bank of weapons, I think that's a new little piece of technology there for CCP. They have occasionally had an extra weapon mount or two when the ship hull required it, often referred to as ghost turrets, that were functional. They didn't really add anything to the firepower of your vessel, but they certainly did make the vessel look more complete without odd gaps here and there because of the number of hard points that you had as opposed to the weapons that you could mount. I really like that. It's a whole complete set, and they all interact with each other. Effectively, instead of just 2 of everything, you have 3 of everything, and they fire in whatever combination seems to make the most sense at the time. And that's really nice. Heck, they could do that with a lot of ships. There are quite a few that would look great just bristling with gun and missile turrets all over them, but yet only the amount up to 8 that you can have on a ship would be firing. It would certainly cut down on the amount of weird effects that you get where a gun appears to be firing through the ship's hull, because it's the only one that can fire. It's the one that's closest, and the design of the ship forces it to fire at a weird angle. This almost virtually ensures that will never happen. You'll never be in a position racing directly away from something where your guns mounted on the nose have to fire back through your superstructure to hit the target. Instead, the rear guns will fire at the target and it will look correct. And it just makes the ship overall look a lot more deadly. Well done, CCP. That's outstanding. Now, the improved sound engine and this after effect sound from the weapons fire is supposed to be implemented on all turreted weapons, and I haven't taken the time to test them all to see if there's any extra cool factor to, say, lasers or blasters, but I'm pretty sure that it's the same type of thing, and it just adds a certain three-dimensional quality to the sound, which is most welcome. Overall, the sound engine as a whole is steadily improving, and I'm very, very pleased to take note of that. I'm going to spin the ship around here in a second, and you can get a little bit better look at the various weapons effects in their new placement and configuration on the ship. Now, those who prefer close quarters combat will be happy to notice that the autocannon sound also has an equally profound snarl to it now, which makes me pretty happy. Let's take her into warp, and I'll show you the last item that I want to highlight in this particular update. The PBR lighting system is going to have another full pass made on it, but did you notice it? The lighting effect as you went through warp, the rippling of shadow and light across your hull, and then when you arrive at a lighter colored planet, and this isn't the best example, you get a lot of backlighting that comes up from the planet itself, where normally this side of the ship would be in pretty deep shadow, as would the underside, and now as we're angled away from the planet and the sun, it's fairly shadowed. But if we turn the ship to where the belly of the ship is toward the sun, of course it's lit up, but now as it turns toward the planet, it also receives a lot of backlighting bouncing up from the planet's surface to illuminate it. And with particularly brightly colored, say, blue planets for a temperate planet, the effect can be fairly striking. But in warp is, I think, the most interesting play of light and shadow across the hull. Let's go ahead and get back into warp. Maybe you can see it a little bit better this time. And there you go. See how it flickers over it as the slipstream of going into warp slides past. That's a subtle effect, but it adds a certain realism to the effect that wasn't there before. All in all, it looks pretty nice. So that's it. What I find to be the most interesting aspects of the Tiamat expansion. And I believe that the Svipul is going to be a fine addition to Minmatar hangars everywhere. A proud addition to your fleet. and an excellent tool to prove your linguistic superiority when you correct newer players when they mispronounce its name. Really, who could ask for anything more? Well, enjoy the new lighting effects and sound engine as well. And until I see you again, good hunting.